Welcome to Noon Wednesday. I'm Marissa Wojcik, multimedia journalist with Here and Now on PBS Wisconsin. Today is September 29. Recently released census data on income and poverty during the pandemic is shedding light on how the impact of pandemic safety net programs and how some lawmakers are shaping future policies. Joining me today to discuss this further is Tamarine Cornelius, research analyst for a children's advocacy nonprofit Kids Forward. And Tamarine, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So to start, the Census Bureau reports that even during this volatile economic time, the stimulus checks, for example, sent to people during 2020 brought 11.7 million people out of poverty nationwide. So do we have an understanding of what that translates to in Wisconsin?
So the Census Bureau just released some new numbers on poverty nationwide. This particular data release doesn't have good statewide numbers because of the size of the survey, but we still know what the national numbers look like, and there's no reason to think that Wisconsin would look different in trends than the national trend. And so the national trend is that the vigorous and extensive government support that was provided in 2020 to cushion the worst economic effects of the pandemic made a really significant difference in people's lives and well-being. So what the numbers show is that government aid, so that includes things like the stimulus checks and refundable credits and SNAP and housing assistance, they lifted 53 million people out of poverty last year. And in fact, when you count these types of government support that were put in place during the pandemic, the poverty rate actually decreased from 2019 to 2020. If you don't count all that aid, then the poverty rate really increased. And what this is showing is that these substantial investments that the government made lifted people up out of poverty.
So what you're saying is technically the numbers do show in some ways that poverty increased, but those rates don't reflect aid included from these temporary government programs enacted in the wake of the pandemic. So overall, millions were lifted out of poverty when those programs were factored in. Is that right?
Right. The official poverty measure, which is pretty flawed, it doesn't count a lot of types of government assistance. And so in 2020, that meant it was almost irrelevant because it didn't, or less relevant because it didn't count these very important lifelines for families. So when we do include those, there's an alternate way of measuring poverty that does include those. And when we do include those, we can see that, how that translated. So you mentioned that between 11 and 12 million people were lifted out of poverty due to the stimulus checks, and another between 5 and 6 million people were lifted out of poverty based on unemployment benefits. So those policies that were put in place in 2020 translated into, millions of people doing better last year.
And additionally, hunger did not rise in 2020, which some are saying is another marker. So all of this seems to imply that these short-term safety net programs, which are now expiring, were effective for their purposes of keeping the economy stable. So now Democrats in Congress are currently trying to pass permanent versions of these programs. Do these permanent programs make sense given that even just for 1 year, they had trillions of dollars in price tags?
Let me actually go back 1 second first and then answer that question, which is that the other point I want to make about these poverty rates is they're one annual figure and they don't reflect the roller coaster of a year that a lot of families had. waiting maybe months to see if their unemployment checks would clear or to see if their stimulus checks were going to come. So that's not to say that there wasn't hardship, because there was a lot of hardship in 2020. And then the other thing is that even though the government support lifted a lot of families out of poverty, we still have much higher rates of poverty for Black and Latino families due to historic and current discrimination in our workplaces, in our schools, in our communities, and elsewhere. And for the question, does the price tag make sense? Is it worth it, basically, as we go forward to try to make some of these policies permanent? So I think there's two answers to that. One is that, can we look for offsets to lower the cost? So in the Build Back Better package, which is before Congress right now, and this is a package of investments in the workforce and in our schools and communities and families. And it includes, for example, a long-term extension of the expanded child tax credit that many of us are benefiting from right now. That package wouldn't add to the deficit very much, even though it's very significant, because it also includes things that reduce the cost by increasing taxes on very wealthy and on profitable corporations, asking them to pay their fair share in taxes. So that's one way we can lower the cost. But I think that the bigger answer to your question, is it worth it, is, how can we not do it almost? Because we know that growing these, especially when it comes to investments in children, if a kid grows up in poverty, that is stressful, and that stress has long-term effects on that kid's life. And if we make a targeted investment that lift that kid up out of poverty, there's a host of positive benefits. The kid is more likely to graduate from high school, get better grades, go to college, hold down a better paying job as an adult, be healthy, contribute to their community in other ways. And so when we say, is it worth it to make this investment, the investment that we make, especially in children, in lifting them up out of poverty, it really has fabulous long-term positive returns. And so if we don't make that, then we're really cheating ourselves out of a better future.
And that part about taxing people who are wealthier, taxing corporations, that is controversial, and why many conservatives and Republicans are pushing back against that way of balancing that budget. Overall, median income fell as many jobs were lost. Republicans, including Wisconsin lawmakers, are arguing that economic aid and extensions of unemployment insurance, for example, are decentivizing people from working, including now. Is that true? And can we expect income levels to rise as jobs are coming back?
So we had a little bit of a natural experiment here, because some states, so during the pandemic, there were 3 ways that the federal government expanded unemployment benefits. Number one, they put more in each check, so you got more money in your pocket. They added more weeks, you could get a longer duration. And then they also expanded the type of workers who could get unemployment benefits. Some states ended their expanded benefits early. So researchers have looked at states that ended their expanded benefits early and states that didn't end their expanded benefits early, to see what the difference is in terms of whether it made a significant difference in the labor force. And it made only a small difference. It wasn't it wasn't the biggest factor. So I think that, and we can see that in Wisconsin, because our expanded benefits have ended now as well. And I don't think that's really translating to employers having an easier time finding people right away, right? So there's a couple things that we can do to help ease that pinch. One is to beat the pandemic. We're still in a pandemic, and there's still dangerous jobs that people don't want to go to. Another thing is to make sure that strengthen our childcare system, because a lot of the childcare system was significantly disrupted during the pandemic. And if people don't have childcare, they can't go to work. And then also to make sure that we have like public transportation systems that can connect people to work. In terms of, our where incomes are probably going to be over time, I think that's still shaking out in terms of what the recovery of the pandemic is going to look like. To some extent, the job losses were among lower paid workers, and those have been a little slower to recover. So we have a little bit of a K-shaped recovery happening where the people at the top, their incomes are continuing to go up, whereas the people on the bottom, they aren't making the same type of recovery. And with so much uncertainty still about where the pandemic is going, I don't think that there's a solid answer on what we can expect people's incomes to look like in the future.
When we last spoke, it was about the expanded child tax credit under the American Rescue Plan, and Democrats want to make that permanent. This is a popular addition to the American Rescue Plan, and repeatedly Democrats said this would lift children out of poverty significantly. And when you talk about, people not being able to go back to work because of childcare issues, or Black and Latino populations being impacted disproportionately, would things like an expanded child tax credit or more support for children make a longer term impact and also help people more at the bottom levels of the income scale?
Those types of improvements would help everybody. Everybody needs childcare, and nearly everyone is benefiting from or many people are benefiting from the child tax credit expansion. It also especially helps people with lowest incomes. There was an improvement to the child tax credit in addition to the part where you actually get the checks, that it used to be that people with the lowest incomes actually didn't qualify for the child tax credit at all. So, and that was changed as part of this improvement. And so, if we can make that change permanent, then we can help families get food on the table. And while it benefits everybody, it especially benefits those who need it the most.
So out of everything that's in this reconciliation bill, this Building Back Better bill, it does have a lot of extremely progressive policies, which is making some more moderate Democrats and especially conservatives a little less interested in participating or voting for it. Is something like supporting expanded child tax credit or other things that are going to help child care, child longevity, are those things a little bit more politically viable?
Well, the Build Back Better is definitely a bold move, right? I mean, it's a bold, ambitious package. Is it possible to pull out pieces? I haven't heard a lot of Republican support for this expanded child tax credit. I don't know if pulling things out would really be a successful strategy because of the limited support. So I haven't heard a lot of effort to do that, and I don't know whether it would work. Yeah.
Also in the congressional sightline is ways to fill gaps for states that have not expanded Medicaid, and this includes Wisconsin. There are 12 GOP-controlled states that have not expanded Medicaid, and so this bill would try and bridge those gaps with maybe expanding Medicare. Could this have an impact on long-term rates of poverty?
Well, it could definitely reduce hardship in Wisconsin and in other states that haven't expanded Medicaid. So Congress is looking at creating a federally run Medicaid-like insurance program that people living in states that haven't expanded Medicaid could access. So that's states like Wisconsin, which despite billions in financial incentives and also the ability to give more people access to health insurance have declined that option. So what this proposal would do would be give people who, through the actions of their state legislature, have been denied access to affordable quality insurance, a new route to get there, and that could help their economic well-being by reducing medical costs and just giving them better access to healthcare.
In the midst of a pandemic, have we learned about how much that is needed given greater need for access to healthcare?
Right. I think the pandemic, showed the limitations of a lot of our systems, including our healthcare system, so that you had to be working, or for many people, you have to be working to get access to healthcare. That's the primary way people get access to health insurance. And if you're not working, then that's more difficult to get access to that. And also our lack of paid leave, although we temporarily had some paid leave during the pandemic, but our lack of permanent paid leave. So when people were out of work because they had COVID or, are caring for somebody with COVID, without a permanent paid leave, policy in place, those people risk losing their jobs and they risk a financial hardship as well.
So when you're looking at the data, and as a research analyst, when you're looking at more data that will be coming in terms of trends and how this will illuminate policy choices and policy approaches, what are you specifically looking for, especially when we kind of consider the very unique time of the pandemic and ways that it has showed us how these systems interact with different circumstances?
Well, the pandemic threw out the data collection processes, a timeline for some surveys for the Census Bureau. So that's a little out of whack, hopefully temporarily, but I think that we'll have some Wisconsin specific figures hopefully later this fall, which we usually get right now. So that could show us how Wisconsin is faring. And then I think another thing to keep an eye on is the changes in well-being for Black and Latinx and Asian and white and Native American families compared to each other, so that we make sure that as we put policies into place, they are getting to who needs it the most. They can help everybody, but make sure that they're also targeted. And then the other thing is that the child tax credit really has been an enormous success in lifting kids out of poverty. In Wisconsin alone, we lifted more than 40,000 kids out of poverty. So that's more. You could fill every seat in American Family Field and more with the number of kids that were lifted out of poverty in Wisconsin temporarily. And so, what do we do with that information that we temporarily made a really significant difference in the lives of these children and these families? That is very positive, but that change is going to end. And how do we take that information and use it to shape our future policies?
All right, we need to leave it there. Tamarine Cornelius of Kids Forward, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
For more from Here and Now in PBS Wisconsin, you can visit pbswisconsin.org, and thank you so much for joining us on Noon Wednesday.